The marble floors of First National Bank's Manhattan flagship branch gleamed under the afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. At 1:47 p.m. on a bustling Tuesday, the institution hummed with the quiet efficiency that came with handling billions of dollars daily. Kesha Thompson stepped through the revolving glass doors, her tailored navy blazer and modest pearl earrings speaking to professional success without ostentation. She moved with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations, yet something in her demeanor remained deliberately understated. The security guard near the entrance, a heavy-set man named Tony Martinez, tracked her movement with narrowed eyes. He leaned toward his colleague and whispered, "She doesn't look like she belongs here." Kesha heard the comment but kept her expression neutral, her dark eyes taking in the opulent surroundings with the practiced assessment of someone who understood power dynamics intimately. She needed to withdraw $50,000 for her foundation's community development project in Harlem. A simple transaction that should take no more than 10 minutes. The irony wasn't lost on her as she surveyed the bank's interior, noting the oil paintings of stern-faced white men who had built this financial empire. What these employees couldn't possibly know, what no one in this marble cathedral of capitalism could fathom, was that the quiet black woman they were already judging owned more of this institution than anyone else in the building. The tension in the air was palpable, crackling with the kind of energy that preceded seismic shifts. You won't believe what happens when she reveals the truth that will shake this entire bank to its very foundation. Kesha approached the customer service area with deliberate calm, observing the stark contrast in treatment as she waited. An elderly white gentleman ahead of her was greeted with warm smiles and immediate attention from the teller, Sarah Martinez, a sharp-featured woman in her 30s whose practiced smile seemed to freeze when she looked at Kesha. "Next," Sarah called, her voice noticeably cooler as Kesha stepped forward. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. The slight stiffening of posture, the barely perceptible tightening around the eyes, the way her fingers drummed impatiently on the counter. "Good afternoon," Kesha said pleasantly, placing her Hermes purse on the counter with quiet confidence. "I'd like to make a withdrawal from my account, please." Sarah's gaze flickered over Kesha's appearance with thinly veiled skepticism. "Do you have an account with us?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, despite the fact that Kesha had simply requested a withdrawal. From his office overlooking the main floor, branch manager Robert Hayes watched the interaction with growing interest. At 52, Hayes had spent his entire career climbing the ladder at First National, and he prided himself on being able to read customers instantly. The sight of this black woman conducting business in his pristine branch triggered something uncomfortable in his chest, a mixture of suspicion and territorial protectiveness. Kesha noticed how other customers, predominantly white professionals and elderly clients, moved through their transactions with ease, their legitimacy never questioned, their presence never scrutinized. She watched as a young white man in jeans and a t-shirt was immediately helped at the next window. No identification requested, no questions asked about his right to be there. The institutional bias was so ingrained, so automatic, that Sarah seemed genuinely unaware of her own behavior. Her body language shifted subtly as she waited for Kesha's response, her expression conveying a mixture of impatience and doubt that would have been shocking if Kesha hadn't witnessed it countless times before in boardrooms, restaurants, and retail establishments across America. Hayes began walking toward the teller windows, his polished shoes clicking against the marble with the rhythm of approaching authority. His presence added weight to the moment, transforming what should have been a routine transaction into something that felt increasingly like a confrontation. Kesha remained perfectly composed, her years of navigating corporate America having taught her to recognize these moments with crystalline clarity. She understood that she was being sized up, judged, and found wanting before she'd even stated her business. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. She was about to be interrogated by employees of an institution she essentially controlled. "I'll need to see multiple forms of identification," Sarah announced, her tone suggesting this was standard procedure, though the businessman who had just completed his transaction ahead of Kesha had been asked for nothing more than his signature. Kesha calmly retrieved her driver's license, American Express Centurion card, and business card from her wallet, placing them on the counter with practiced patience. "Of course, I understand you need to verify my identity." Sarah examined each document with exaggerated thoroughness, holding the cards up to the light as if checking for forgeries. "Kesha Thompson, and what type of account do you have with us?" "A private banking account," Kesha replied evenly. "I'd like to withdraw $50,000 for a business transaction." The amount seemed to electrify the air around them. Sarah's eyebrows shot up, and her voice carried a note of disbelief that she didn't bother to conceal. $50,000? That's quite a substantial amount. Are you certain this account belongs to you?" Robert Hayes materialized beside the teller window, as if summoned by the mention of the large sum. His grey suit was impeccably tailored, his presence radiating the kind of authority that came from decades of banking experience and institutional power. "Is there a problem here?" Hayes inquired, though his question was directed at Sarah rather than Kesha, already establishing where his sympathies lay. "This customer is requesting a large withdrawal," Sarah explained, her voice carrying implications that hung heavy in the air. "I'm just making sure we follow proper protocols." Hayes turned his attention to Kesha, his pale blue eyes conducting their own assessment. "Ma'am, a withdrawal of this magnitude requires additional verification. We need to ensure there's no fraudulent activity involved." The word fraudulent hit the air like a slap, its implications clear to everyone within earshot. Kesha felt the familiar burn of institutionalized racism disguised as professional diligence, but her expression remained serene, almost meditative. "I understand your concerns," Kesha replied, her voice carrying the weight of years spent navigating such encounters. "What additional verification do you require?" Hayes consulted with Sarah in whispers that weren't quite quiet enough to be private. "People in certain circumstances are often used as fronts for money laundering operations," he said, his carefully chosen words loaded with meaning. "We need to be thorough." Other customers had begun to notice the commotion, their curiosity piqued by the hushed conferences and the obvious tension radiating from the teller area. A few stepped closer, their body language betraying a mixture of concern and voyeuristic interest. Kesha discreetly activated the voice recorder on her phone, a habit developed through years of documenting such encounters for legal purposes. She watched as Hayes and Sarah exchanged meaningful looks, their nonverbal communication speaking volumes about their assumptions and intentions. The institutional machinery of discrimination was cranking to life around her, each question and procedure designed to wear down her resolve and establish their authority over her presence in their space. "I'm going to need you to wait in our private consultation area while we verify your account status," Hayes announced, his tone brooking no argument. The private consultation area was a glass-walled cubicle typically reserved for discussing loan rejections and account closures, visible to the entire banking floor, but separate enough to create the impression of wrongdoing. As if orchestrated by some cruel cosmic timing, Marcus Chen, a financial reporter for Bloomberg, had been conducting interviews in the bank's lobby about consumer banking trends. His cameraman was capturing B-roll footage when the situation at the teller window caught his attention. The tension was too palpable to ignore, and within moments he had begun live streaming the unfolding drama on his Instagram account. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to have a seat over there," Sarah said, pointing toward the glass cubicle with barely concealed satisfaction. "This type of situation requires careful handling." The word situation hung in the air like an indictment, transforming Kesha from customer to suspect in the span of a heartbeat. As she was escorted to the consultation area, conversations throughout the bank floor began to quiet, replaced by the electric buzz of whispered speculation. Hayes raised his voice just enough to ensure his words carried across the marble expanse. We take potential fraud very seriously at First National Bank. When someone attempts to access funds they may not be legitimately entitled to, we have protocols in place to protect all our customers. The implication was crystal clear. Kesha was being publicly branded as a potential criminal. The glass walls of the consultation area transformed her into a specimen on display, her dignity stripped away with surgical precision. Folks, we're witnessing what appears to be a serious situation unfolding at First National Bank. Marcus narrated into his phone, his follower count climbing as viewers shared the stream. A customer is being questioned about a large withdrawal, and the tension here is absolutely palpable. Kesha sat with perfect posture in the consultation area, her hands folded in her lap, her expression maintaining the dignity that years of executive leadership had ingrained in her. She reached into her purse and sent a brief text message to her assistant. Initiate Protocol 7. Full documentation required. Through the glass walls, she could see other customers craning their necks to get a better view of the criminal in their midst. Some shook their heads with knowing disapproval, while others whispered among themselves about the suspicious circumstances of her presence. Hayes conferred with security personnel, their animated gestures and serious expressions painting a picture of imminent threat for the growing audience of onlookers. The live stream viewer count continued climbing, with comments flooding in from viewers trying to understand what they were witnessing. People like this often target upscale financial institutions, Hayes said, his voice carrying just far enough to reach the nearby customers. They assume we won't scrutinize their activities as closely as we should. The phrase, "people like this," echoed through the bank lobby with the weight of centuries of prejudice, each word carefully chosen to convey maximum implication while maintaining plausible deniability. These procedures seemed designed to target one specific demographic. But did they have any idea who they were really dealing with? The situation began its inexorable escalation as Hayes summoned Marcus Thompson, the head of bank security, a man whose imposing 6'4" frame and stern expression had been cultivated through 20 years of military and security experience. Marcus's arrival transformed the already tense situation into something approaching a crisis. "We have a potential security threat," Hayes announced, his voice carrying across the lobby with theatrical authority. "This individual is attempting to access a substantial amount of money under questionable circumstances." Sarah had rallied 2 additional tellers to her cause, creating an impromptu tribunal of suspicion. "The account details don't match her profile," she explained to her colleagues, the pause before profile speaking volumes about her unspoken assumptions. The live stream viewer count had exploded to 15,000, with comments flooding in from across the country. Some viewers expressed outrage at what they were witnessing, while others defended the bank's right to protect itself from fraud. The hashtag #JingFirstNationalScandal began trending as the stream was shared across social media platforms. "This is absolutely unbelievable," Marcus Chen narrated to his growing audience. "What started as a routine banking transaction has evolved into what appears to be a full-scale investigation of this customer." The crowd of onlookers had grown substantially, with some customers abandoning their own banking business to witness the spectacle. An elderly white woman near the front of the crowd shook her head disapprovingly. "Young people today think they can just walk into places like this and take whatever they want," she muttered to her companion. Hayes had now involved 3 different departments in the investigation, each consultant adding another layer of bureaucratic intimidation to the process. "We're going to need to contact our fraud prevention specialists," he announced loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. Transactions of this nature involving individuals of this background require special protocols. Kesha remained seated in the glass consultation room, her composure never wavering despite the circus developing around her. She continued to type discreet messages on her phone, her expression serene even as the institutional machinery of discrimination churned at full capacity around her. Marcus Thompson approached the consultation area with the swagger of someone who had handled countless troublemakers throughout his career. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to remain calm while we sort this situation out," he said, his tone implying that Kesha had been anything but calm, though she hadn't moved or spoken since being isolated. "I understand you've got some concerns about accessing these funds," Marcus continued, his voice designed to carry across the lobby. "But we've got procedures here, and everyone needs to follow them, regardless of who they think they are." The live stream had now reached 25,000 viewers, with major news outlets beginning to take notice of the viral incident. Comments were flying faster than the screen could display them, creating a real-time commentary on institutional racism in American banking. "This is insane," typed one viewer. "They're treating her like a criminal for trying to access her own money." Another commented, "The bank has every right to verify large transactions. This is standard procedure." Hayes consulted his watch with theatrical precision. "We've been at this for 45 minutes now, and frankly, legitimate customers don't usually require this level of scrutiny." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Legitimate customers were apparently defined by their appearance and background, not by their actual account status or legal right to access their funds. Kesha looked up from her phone and made brief eye contact with Marcus Chen's camera through the glass walls. Her expression remained unreadable, but something in her eyes suggested that the entire situation was about to shift in ways that nobody could anticipate. The tension had reached a breaking point, with over 30 bank employees, security personnel, and customers now involved in or observing the unfolding drama. The livestream viewer count continued climbing toward 50,000 as word spread across social media platforms about the extraordinary scene playing out in real time. The moment arrived with the sharp ring of Robert Hayes's office phone cutting through the tension like a blade. He glanced at the caller ID and his expression shifted from confident authority to confusion. The call was coming from the executive floor, 20 stories above. "Hayes speaking," he answered, his voice carrying across the hushed lobby as 50,000 live stream viewers watched in real time. The voice on the other end belonged to James Morrison, CEO of First National Bank's entire North American operations. His tone was ice-cold and surgical in its precision. "Mr. Hayes, I understand you're currently interrogating one of our most important stakeholders." Hayes felt the blood drain from his face. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand." "Ms. Kesha Thompson, Mr. Hayes, the woman you've spent the last hour publicly humiliating happens to be the largest individual shareholder of First National Bank. She owns 35% of our company's stock." The words hit Hayes like a physical blow. Around the lobby, conversations ceased as employees and customers sensed the seismic shift occurring in real time. Marcus Chen's livestream captured every second as Hayes's confident demeanor crumbled into something approaching panic. That's impossible," Hayes stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's the chairman of our board of directors, Mr. Hayes, and you've just provided her with a masterclass in institutional discrimination that's currently being broadcast to over 50,000 people." Through the glass walls of the consultation area, Kesha rose from her chair with fluid grace. She reached into her Hermes purse and withdrew a leather portfolio that she'd been carrying all along. The livestream captured every movement as she walked toward the main counter, her bearing transforming from patient customer to boardroom authority. "I am Kesha Thompson," she announced, her voice carrying with quiet power across the marble expanse. chairman of the board of directors and principal shareholder of First National Bank. She placed the portfolio on the counter and opened it, revealing official corporate documents, stock certificates, and board meeting minutes bearing her signature and photograph. The evidence was irrefutable and had been with her the entire time. I came here today to conduct a simple business transaction. Kesha continued, her voice steady and professional. Instead, I've received a comprehensive demonstration of the systemic bias that our customers of color face every day in our institutions. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Hayes had gone completely pale, the phone still pressed to his ear as Morrison's voice continued delivering consequences. Sarah Martinez stood frozen behind the teller window, her face a mask of pure terror as the implications crashed over her. Marcus Thompson, the security chief, took an involuntary step backward, his imposing presence suddenly seeming small and ridiculous in the face of this revelation. The woman he'd been prepared to escort from the building owned the building. The livestream exploded with activity as viewers processed what they were witnessing. Comments flooded in faster than the screen could display. "Holy shit, she owns the bank." "This is the most incredible plot twist ever." "Those employees are so fired." Marcus Chen struggled to maintain his professional composure as he narrated the historic moment. "Folks, what we're witnessing here is absolutely unprecedented. The customer who has been subjected to this treatment for the past hour has just revealed that she owns the bank." Kesha's expression remained serene, almost meditative, as she watched the reality sink in around her. "The treatment I've received today is not unique to me. It's a daily reality for millions of Americans who don't happen to own the institutions they're trying to do business with." The transformation in the room was complete and irreversible. Employees who had been part of the investigation now looked as though they wished the marble floor would open and swallow them whole. Customers who had whispered disapprovingly about Kesha now avoided eye contact entirely. "This ends now," Kesha said quietly, but her words carried the weight of absolute authority. The atmosphere had shifted from humiliation to reckoning, and everyone present understood that nothing would ever be the same. The reckoning was swift and merciless. Kesha's first executive decision was delivered with the calm precision of someone who had spent decades in boardrooms making choices that affected thousands of lives. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice carrying across the silent lobby, "your employment with First National Bank is terminated, effective immediately. Your actions today constitute a gross violation of our anti-discrimination policies and our corporate values." Hayes's face went through a series of transformations: disbelief, panic, and finally, desperate pleading. "Ms. Thompson, please, I have a family, a mortgage. I didn't know." "Your ignorance of my identity doesn't excuse your behavior toward any customer," Kesha replied, cutting through his excuses with surgical precision. "Your conduct would have been equally unacceptable regardless of who I was." Security personnel who moments earlier had been Hayes's allies now stood ready to escort him from the building. The livestream captured every moment of his downfall, from his confident authority to his current humiliation, creating a real-time documentation of consequences. Sarah Martinez stood frozen behind her teller window, tears streaming down her face as she realized her career had just evaporated. "Ms. Thompson," she whispered, "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean—" "Ms. Martinez, you are suspended without pay pending a full investigation into your conduct," Kesha announced. "You will be required to complete comprehensive sensitivity training before any consideration of reinstatement. Your actions today will be documented in your permanent employment record." The live stream viewer count had reached an astounding 75,000, with major news networks beginning to pick up the story. Comments flooded in from around the world as viewers watched institutional karma being served in real time. Marcus Thompson, the security chief, approached Kesha with his head lowered in submission. "Ma'am, I apologize profusely for my behavior. I was completely out of line." Mr. Thompson, you will be transferred to a different division where you can learn to treat all individuals with the respect they deserve. Kesha replied, Your assumption that authority gives you the right to intimidate customers ends today. Kesha turned to address the entire lobby, her voice carrying the weight of both personal experience and corporate authority. Let me be absolutely clear. First National Bank will institute immediate policy changes to ensure that what happened here today never happens again. She outlined her reforms with the precision of someone who had been planning these changes long before today's incident provided the catalyst. We will implement bias training for all customer-facing employees. We will establish an independent oversight committee to investigate discrimination complaints, and we will create a customer advocacy fund to support individuals who have been wronged by institutional bias. The crowd of onlookers, customers and employees alike, listened in stunned silence as Kesha transformed her personal humiliation into systematic change. Her composure never wavered, her authority never questioned, as she wielded her power with the precision of a surgeon excising a cancer. Furthermore, Kesha continued, First National Bank will publicly acknowledge what occurred here today and commit to transparency in our efforts to address institutional discrimination throughout our organization. Hayes was escorted from the building by the same security personnel who had been prepared to remove Kesha an hour earlier. His 20-year career with First National Bank ended not with a retirement party or a golden watch, but with a viral video documenting his downfall broadcast to hundreds of thousands of viewers. The livestream had become a global phenomenon, with hashtags like "Do Justice Served" and "Be Banking While Black" trending across all major social media platforms. News outlets were already preparing segments about the incident, and legal experts were being contacted for commentary on the implications. Sarah Martinez gathered her personal belongings from her teller station under the watchful eyes of supervisors, her professional life reduced to a cardboard box and a lesson in the consequences of prejudice. Her tears continued to flow as she walked past Kesha, unable to meet the eyes of the woman she had so thoroughly misjudged. The atmosphere in the bank had completely transformed. Where an hour earlier there had been tension and hostility, now there was a mixture of awe, fear, and respect. Kesha had not raised her voice, had not threatened or intimidated anyone, but had nonetheless completely restructured the power dynamics in the room through the sheer force of revealed truth. As the initial shock of revelations began to settle, Kesha turned her attention to the live stream camera that had documented the entire extraordinary sequence of events. The viewer count had stabilized at over 100,000, with thousands more joining every minute as news of the incident spread across social media platforms. Today was not about revenge. Kesha began, her voice carrying the measured cadence of someone who had spent years addressing boardrooms and shareholders. What you witnessed here was not the story of one woman's triumph, but rather a window into the daily reality faced by millions of Americans who don't have the privilege of owning the institutions that serve them. She moved closer to the camera, her expression open and vulnerable in a way that contrasted sharply with the corporate authority she had displayed moments earlier. I am the daughter of a Detroit auto worker and a school teacher. My path to this position was not given to me. It was earned through education, hard work, and the support of communities that believed in the power of perseverance. The livestream comments had shifted from expressions of shock and excitement to deeper conversations about systemic racism and institutional bias. Viewers were sharing their own experiences with discrimination, creating a real-time dialogue about issues that had been brought into sharp focus by the day's events. The behavior you witnessed today is not unique to First National Bank. Kesha continued. It exists in hospitals where black patients receive inferior care, in schools where black children are suspended at disproportionate rates, in courtrooms where black defendants receive harsher sentences for identical crimes. Her voice carried the weight of personal experience and statistical knowledge, the authority of someone who had lived through discrimination, while simultaneously studying its systematic manifestations. But today also demonstrates that change is possible when we refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. Kesha outlined her vision for transformation that extended far beyond the marble halls of First National Bank. We will be implementing the most comprehensive anti-bias training program in the financial industry. We will be partnering with community organizations to ensure that our services are accessible to all Americans, regardless of their appearance or background. The camera captured her gesture towards the now empty consultation area, where she had spent the most humiliating hour of her professional life. That glass room will be converted into a customer advocacy center, where individuals who feel they have been discriminated against can receive immediate attention and support. Her commitment to change was both personal and institutional, driven by the understanding that her position of power came with the responsibility to create opportunities for others who might not have her resources or influence. True leadership means using your platform to lift others up, not to insulate yourself from the struggles they face. The livestream had become more than just documentation of an incident. It had evolved into a masterclass in leadership and social responsibility. Kesha's measured response to humiliation had transformed a moment of personal vindication into a broader conversation about justice and equality. Change begins with each of us, in every interaction we have, every assumption we challenge, every opportunity we create for understanding rather than judgment. She concluded. Today was painful, but pain often precedes healing, and healing requires acknowledgement of the wound. As the live stream entered its final minutes, with viewer numbers approaching 150,000, Kesha's demeanor shifted subtly. The corporate executive receded, replaced by something more personal and direct. A woman speaking to other women and men who had walked similar paths of dignity through discrimination. "I want to leave you with this," she said, looking directly into the camera with an intensity that seemed to reach through screens across the world. "Every person deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance, their accent, their zip code, or their bank account balance." Her voice carried the conviction of someone who had personally experienced both sides of the power dynamic that had played out in the bank that afternoon. If you see discrimination happening, speak up. If you experience it yourself, document it. And if you have the power to change systems, use it. The comment section exploded with commitments from viewers to do exactly that, to be more aware, more active, more willing to confront bias when they encountered it. The incident had created a moment of collective consciousness that extended far beyond the marble walls of First National Bank. "Share this story," Kesha continued, "not because it's entertaining or dramatic, but because it illustrates that change is possible when we refuse to accept injustice as normal." She paused, allowing a small smile to cross her features for the first time since entering the bank hours earlier. The expression transformed her face, revealing the warmth and humanity that had been masked by the day's events. "And remember this," she said, her eyes twinkling with a mixture of humor and hard-earned wisdom. "The next time you're tempted to judge someone based on their appearance or make assumptions about what they can or cannot afford, what they do or do not deserve." Her voice took on a playful note that nonetheless carried serious implications. "You never know when the person you're underestimating might be the person who signs your paychecks." The final comment was delivered with perfect timing and impeccable control, a reminder that power dynamics can shift in an instant when truth is revealed. Always treat people with respect. You truly never know who they really are. As Marcus Chen ended the live stream, the final image captured Kesha walking toward the bank's exit with the same quiet dignity she had possessed when entering. But now the meaning of that dignity had been completely transformed, revealed to be not the hopeful posturing of someone seeking acceptance, but the earned confidence of someone who had never needed anyone's approval. The marble floors that had witnessed her humiliation now reflected her triumph. But more importantly, they had become the stage for a conversation about justice that would continue long after she walked through those revolving doors. "Respect costs nothing," she said over her shoulder to the camera, "but ignorance costs everything." The reverberations of that Tuesday afternoon at First National Bank began almost immediately. Within hours, the live stream had been viewed over 5 million times, shared across every major social media platform, and dissected by news outlets from CNN to the BBC. The hashtag "Respect costs nothing" had become a global rallying cry, trending in 14 countries. In the weeks that followed, Kesha's transformation of First National Bank became a case study taught in business schools across America. Her implementation of the Thompson Protocol, a comprehensive framework for identifying and eliminating institutional bias in customer service, was adopted by major corporations throughout the financial sector and beyond. The glass consultation room where she had been humiliated was indeed converted into a customer advocacy center, staffed by specially trained representatives whose sole purpose was to ensure that every client, regardless of their background, received dignified treatment. A bronze plaque beside the entrance read simply, "Everyone deserves respect." Robert Hayes never found employment in the banking industry again. The viral video of his downfall had made him unemployable in any customer-facing financial role. He eventually took a position as a night security guard at a warehouse in Queens, his fall from grace complete and irreversible. In rare interviews, he would acknowledge that his behavior had been wrong, but the hollow ring of his apologies suggested a man who understood the consequences of his actions without truly grasping their moral weight. Sarah Martinez spent 8 months in sensitivity training before being offered a position at a community bank in the Bronx, a deliberate choice that forced her to serve the very communities she had once looked down upon. The experience proved transformative. Working with immigrant families trying to establish credit, elderly customers on fixed incomes, and young entrepreneurs seeking their first business loans, she began to understand that dignity was not determined by account balances or skin color. Marcus Thompson, the former security chief, was transferred to the bank's corporate training division, where his military background proved valuable in developing protocols that emphasized de-escalation and respect. His own experience of misjudging someone so completely had given him unique insight into the dangers of assumptions and the importance of treating every interaction as an opportunity to build trust rather than assert dominance. The live stream had created ripple effects that extended far beyond the individuals directly involved. Marcus Chen's journalism career was catapulted to new heights as networks competed to hire the reporter who had captured the most significant moment of corporate accountability in recent memory. He used his newfound platform to investigate similar incidents across various industries, becoming a leading voice in exposing institutional discrimination. Dr. Angela Williams, a sociology professor at Columbia University, who had been studying systemic racism in financial institutions for over a decade, found herself overwhelmed with requests for commentary on the incident. "What makes the Thompson case so significant," she explained to a packed auditorium, "is not just that justice was served, but that it was served in real time with full transparency, creating an unprecedented moment of accountability. The incident sparked a national conversation about the everyday indignities faced by people of color in professional settings. Countless individuals shared their own stories of being followed in stores, questioned about their presence in upscale establishments, or treated with suspicion when conducting routine business transactions. The Fairhand Respect Costs Nothing movement became a repository for these experiences, creating a collective documentation of systemic bias. 3 months after the incident, Kesha was invited to address a joint session of the House Financial Services Committee and the Senate Banking Committee. Her testimony, delivered with the same measured authority she had displayed in the bank that day, led to the introduction of the Customer Dignity Act, legislation requiring financial institutions to implement bias training and establish independent oversight mechanisms for discrimination complaints. The American dream promises that success should be determined by merit, not melanin, she told the assembled lawmakers. When our institutions fail to live up to that promise, they fail not just individual customers, but the very ideals upon which our democracy was founded. The legislation passed with bipartisan support, marking the first major civil rights advancement in the financial sector in over a decade. Banks across the country were required to adopt protocols similar to those Kesha had implemented at First National, creating a new standard for customer treatment that prioritized dignity and respect over assumptions and prejudices. First National Bank itself became the most diverse and inclusive financial institution in America under Kesha's continued leadership. Employee satisfaction scores reached record highs as the toxic culture of bias and discrimination was systematically dismantled and replaced with one of mutual respect and professional excellence. Customer satisfaction followed suit, with the bank receiving unprecedented praise for its commitment to serving all communities with equal dedication. The anniversary of the incident was marked by the establishment of the Thompson Foundation for Financial Justice, a non-profit organization dedicated to providing banking services and financial education to underserved communities. The foundation's headquarters occupied the same Manhattan building where Kesha had been humiliated, transforming a site of discrimination into a beacon of opportunity. Kesha herself had become one of the most sought-after speakers in corporate America, her story serving as both inspiration and warning to executives across industries. Her message was always the same. True leadership required the courage to confront uncomfortable truths about systemic bias and the commitment to create meaningful change. That day in the bank, she would often say in her speeches, I could have simply revealed my identity immediately and avoided the humiliation entirely. But sometimes we must be willing to experience injustice in order to expose it, to document it, and ultimately to defeat it. The live stream video itself had been preserved in the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, recognized as a pivotal moment in the ongoing struggle for civil rights and economic justice. Visitors would often stand in silence before the exhibit, processing the power of one woman's dignity in the face of institutional discrimination. Years later, as Kesha continued to serve as chairman of First National Bank's board of directors, she would sometimes walk through the Manhattan branch where it all began. The marble floors still gleamed, the oil paintings of stern-faced founders still hung on the walls, but the atmosphere had been fundamentally transformed. Where once there had been an undercurrent of bias and exclusion, now there was genuine warmth and professional respect for every customer who walked through those doors. The transformation was perhaps best symbolized by the new motto carved into the marble above the main entrance: "Respect costs nothing, but dignity is priceless."